Okay, everyone. Hello and good evening and welcome to week three's lesson on game development in Unity. I hope everyone is still with me. So it's 6:30. We're supposed to start at 6, but a lot of people still haven't joined, so I guess we still have to begin
Yes, we
because
can hear you. We can hear you.
awesome. We still have to begin because time is running out and we can't push this any further. So yeah, let's begin. Give me a second. I hope all of you can see my screen. Um, Please view it so we can begin. If you can't, let me know too as well. Awesome. I guess everyone can. Okay. Yes. So welcome to week three. Wow. Yes, I'm fine. Yes. So let's begin with basically week three is all about coding. So welcome. We're about to take a short walk through what programming is. So, I don't know if any of you have an idea or have ever tried writing code before. Does anyone have any experience with writing code, scripts, anything before? HTML, it's a fight if HTML is a language. I prefer not to weigh in that argument. But HTML, but I'll ask if HTML, CSS, Java, JavaScript, um, Scratch is considered a language now. So if you've delved with any one of them, I think maybe you would be a little bit comfortable with some of the concepts we'll be talking about. But I'll take my time to explain each and every one of them when we meet them. So first things first, before I even start talking about anything related to program what programming is, first thing we want to do is we open up Unity. So where we left off in the project, I know you guys should have gone past this, but I mean I've worked on this thing like 3-4 times. I really didn't want to develop another level. So mine is exactly where it was the last time we started. So yeah, forgive me about that. But basically, I think this is actually quite a traverse, like a word that can be traversed. But this isn't our issue right now. The main issue is we have to make sure that Visual Studio is installed on your PC. I mean, I'm sure Visual Studio is installed, but we have to make sure that Unity can see that installation. So what we're going to do is, with our open Unity, go to the toolbar. For Mac users, I'm sure it's that's the basically the menu bar and the program bar, whatever they call it. That's what you call it. And go to edit. Um, Inside edits, you should go down to preferences and click on preferences. It should bring up a preferences window. And inside preferences, you would want to look for external tools. So there's general 2D analysis, cache, server, colors, external tools. So you want to click on external tools. And inside external tools, what everyone should see here should be Visual Studio 2019 community. That's what should be there. Mine is different because I use a different I prefer a different IDE. So an IDE is an integrated development environment like Visual Studio 2019. That's what allows you to write code. It's an environment that allows you to write code for specific languages. So everyone has a preferable tool of their choice. Visual Studio 2019 is the free version. Is the one that comes with Unity. Is the free version, but I'm using Rider because I prefer Rider. But it's not free, unfortunately. So Yeah, but it's all the same. The code doesn't change. It doesn't really matter. But everyone should see Visual Studio 2019 here. Like it should be that should be what that should be as the external script editor. If you don't, please let me know so that we know how we can deal with it immediately. I'm waiting for feedback so that I know if I'm supposed to move on or not. So please give me feedback if the external tool is available or not.
Hello, a moment, just checking through.
Sure.
Apologies. Can you recap the flow
Sure.
to the
No worries.
preferences? Yeah.
No worries. So in your in your window in the menu bar, you click on edits, and then when you click on it, it gives you a drop down. Look for preferences. So there's undo, redo, select, blah blah, blah all the way to the getting to the bottom. You should see project settings and preferences. Click on preferences, and then when you click on preferences, usually it takes you straight to the external tool if you've not been messing around with your preferences. But if it doesn't, you should see external tools right there. Just click on it, and then you would see your external tools right there. And you should see Visual Studio 2019 beside the external script editor. If you don't, we would have to
Okay, yeah.
install it.
So I can see.
You can see it also.
Okay, I
Yeah.
see. I see two things actually. I see the Visual Studio Code and the Visual Studio
Visual
Community.
Studio Code
Community. So
community. Yes. So you'd want to use
yeah.
community. Community is the one that comes with Unity. That's like the preferred one. But you can also use code. But then when you use code, it means you'd have to install. You'd have to install C sharp, the C sharp library for Visual Studio Code, which is another whole long process you don't want to go through. So just stick with Visual Studio Community. It comes with all the dependencies and requirements you want. Zenon, I'm sure you were trying to answer us, but we didn't hear your answer. But you can type it in the general chat if it's available to you, so that I know. I know Mason has his installed because of taking help in that one. Fabio too has his installed, so I guess we're good to go. Um, except with Zenon, we're still waiting on Zenon.
Hello, can you hear me? I seems
Yes, I can hear
not
you.
to hear anything again.
Yeah, I was
Okay, I can hear
waiting.
you now.
Yeah, I was waiting for Zenon to reply, but it seems like he's having. Oh, you can't see your preferences. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, yes, yes, yes. For Mac, click on the Apple logo, and then you should see preferences. Like while the Unity application is open, click on the Apple logo. You should see preferences from there. Not system preferences. Um, hold on. I forget the exact what exactly is called, but I can check right now for you. Hold on. Just give me a second. Let me just find this. Oh, you found it. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Cool. Great. Okay. Also, so I think Jeffrey has found preferences. I'm sure he's also running the same because he couldn't find visuals to do within the modules. So I'm guessing he's safe. So yeah, we've solved that issue. We can now move on to the next, which is actually looking at the programming. So introduction to programming, an actual introduction to programming. So the question is, what is programming? So you think of programming as instructing a computer to perform specific tasks, but in sequential order. In a sequential order. So you you tell a computer to do this, then do that, then do that. It's also called procedural programming. It's step by step where you tell the computer what to do each step of the way according to how you write your code. And the how the computer understands depends on the syntax you use to write it. So there are multiple syntaxes you can use. For us, we so basically think of a syntax as the language that the computer understands. So there are multiple languages depending on what you feel more comfortable with. So think of the syntax as the language for communication. Just as we have English and Tree and Hausa, it's the same. We have multiple languages, and the one you learn and you feel comfortable speaking is what you use when you're writing code. But unfortunately, you are restricted at some points where some softwares require some specific code, or you can't work with that software. For example, Unity requires C sharp, or it means you cannot speak with you cannot speak with Unity. So yeah, but usually they all hold the same um, core concepts within them. So nothing really changes when you're talking about not a lot changes. The logic usually stays the same, and it's almost the same for languages because those languages that are gotten from the Latin origin more apparently are kind of usually the same. So if you learn a lot of languages, you'd actually realize a lot of similarities, which actually makes it easier to learn more languages. It's the same with computer language. So basically, that's where the syntax is. So there are multiple programming languages. There's C sharp, there's C++, there's Java, Python, JavaScript, Swift, and PHP. So each one has like its strengths and weaknesses. C sharp is right now is actually quite an all-round language, both front end and back end for back end stuff. C plus plus is C++ is the closest you get um to, to the CPU basically. C plus plus is the lowest is a really low level language. There's also C, but like that. Basically think of C plus plus as like one of those like really powerful languages. It doesn't really matter if you don't want to use it. It's actually really good, but it's great for writing um very it's good for writing softwares that you would require you to like optimize your code. Like you could write it with any other, but C plus plus like takes you down to that level where you're actually speaking with the hardware and everything. Not necessarily the hardware, but you get what I mean. Java is an all-round great language. It's very similar to C sharp. That's what you use to write Android. If you've ever written any Android code, usually you write it with Java. Now there's Kotlin. Um, yeah, but I haven't really played around with Kotlin, so I don't know how unique it is. But I heard Kotlin is similar to Swift. We'll get to Swift. Python is one great language for anyone who is starting to programming. It's actually quite easy. It's actually closer to English. It's just like you read it. Right now, Python has is being used a lot for like machine learning stuff. It's really great. So AI and all that stuff like that. That's Python. JavaScript is a web technology, but has gained a lot of prominence with it's like multiple frameworks that are running on JavaScript now with Vue and React Native, React. Angular, name it. There's so much. JavaScript is there for you. Swift is used for iOS development. It's a sweet language, really, really sweet. It's also similar to C Sharp as well. And PHP is a really heavy language. Personally, I don't like it, but that's Mason's language. Mason thrives in PHP. PHP is great for backend. I don't know which other applications PHP can be used for, but from my knowledge, PHP is usually used with backend stuff. So let's talk about basic programming basics. So before we go into like talking about what like the programming basics, let's first of all create a script in Unity. Now there are two ways to create a script. You could literally right click and oh the, so each language Jeffrey's asking which language is more practical. So there are no like specific languages that are like practical, but usually when you're tackling a project or any like any yeah, if you're creating a software tackling any project, there are some languages that uh, will be more suited to solve that issue than others. For example, if you're making a software like Unity or anything that is related to 3D stuff, again, you could use multiple languages, but C++ would be your best option because that's like base code. You don't have to rely on anyone's existing technology to write. You can literally write it yourself. That's like a technical artist. Um, if you are trying to work on a web on a website, JavaScript for interactivity, JavaScript to be your option. So again, it's there's no like one. This is like the best one practically, but um, this is more of okay, which tool is right for the job? Like, it's okay, this is better than this because you would find yourself, if especially if you're a software engineer that's like moving around, you find yourself like learning multiple technologies as time goes because each company has um what they want to use, like what they want in terms of like their technology stack, and you would have to conform to it. It's not most of the time you have to have prior knowledge of something close to it. For example, if you work in the web space, you know JavaScript. So if you're bouncing between multiple JavaScript frameworks, it's not an issue because you know the core fundamental JavaScript and whatever is overlined on it, which is the framework you're working with. It's just the change of syntax that you have to get used to. But then the language itself doesn't change. So yeah, it's more of what tool is right for the job instead of okay, one tool is the best for all. For all. Yes. So yeah, back to our yeah. So first things first, we have to create a script in Unity. There are two ways to creating scripts. So you could create a script by right clicking in the project window and um, go to create, and you should see a C sharp script right there. You can click on it, and then it will create a new C sharp script, and then you can name it. It's usually empty. It's usually like having a default name and waiting for you to give it a name. So for us, let's give it a name of test. Mason's favorite um, word. Great. So test. So that's literally we created a script. Now, in order to get your script running, you need to attach it to something that's in there that is already existing within your scene. So you need to attach what the test. We need to attach this test to anything. It could be anything. Like it just has to be attached to the screen. That is if you don't really have a specific use of that script. Maybe you just want the script to um check how long the game has been open for. Usually, you don't give it to any object. You could give it to something called a manager. You could create an empty object and call it a manager. But then again, you could so that you can keep track of whatever is doing whatever. But you could just as saying give it to this cloud or give it to this box and just let it run. So in order to make your script run, you need to attach it to something. So for our script, we want to attach it to the main camera. So you should find your main camera within your hierarchy scene, click on it, and you should see the options appear on your right within your inspector. So I want you to click on the newly created script the script you just created. Click on it and drag it into the inspector window of the main camera. So remember, you said the main camera, which means it's open in the inspector window. Click on the test and drag it into the main camera window, into the main inspector window containing the options for the main camera. You should see a blue line appear. Move it close to the ad company. You can actually move it to the top or right in the middle here. It doesn't really matter, but just move it close here. You should see like a blue line and let it go, and that's it. It's added to it. Um, you've added a script to an object. So I guess I'll explain more as to why when you add this, why you're adding the script to the object, whatever object it is, and how it works basically when we're talking about each variable. But yeah, that's how you add the script to an object. Just click and drag. There's also another way. We'll talk about that one later on. So basically, now that we've created a script and we've linked our Visual Studio community to Unity, all we have to do is double click on this and it should open Visual Studio community for us. Great. So mine is open. I'm guessing not everyone's is open, so I'll just wait. When yours is open, just let me know in the general chat. So that I know basically. Yeah, I'm hoping everyone's on this open as well. So let's move on. So now you should see something like this using Unity Engine and then the public class, the name of the class, and what it's inheriting from, and also two functions, which is a start block and an end block. This is basically, you should be seeing something like this. So every time you create a new sorry about that. So every time you create um, a new Unity, any Unity script, any new Unity script, Unity gives you a basic what do you call it, a template you can work off from. It's not necessarily a template. It's actually just like what you need to start working. You start with.
It's not working.
It's not working.
No. It says that um, coming.
Okay.
When I press open, something pops up. Okay, okay, it's come now.
Okay. Awesome. Yes, it takes some time.
So,
Yeah. No worries. Yes. So what was that? Yes, I was explaining what this is. So um basically what this is a class. So think of a class as um think of a class as looking for a good explanation for that. Think of a class as a car basically, and um within the car, like there are other objects within the car that you can reference to do specific stuff. So For example, you have a class of a car, and within that car, there's an engine, there's a steering wheel, there are tires, and so on and so forth. Now, you can work with um, what happens is within that class, you can call like objects within that class, such as the engine to start, or the tires to turn, or um, whatever it is you want. And usually, classes inherit from you can usually classes can be on their own, or they can inherit from what do you call it, from a unity in the from mono behavior. So mono behavior is the base class within unity that it holds most of the things you require to work with unity at any point in time. But if you want, if you're working on something you want to go lean, you could actually inherit from a specific what do you call it, from a specific tool within Unity. For example, you want to inherit the events, um, only from events. So maybe when an event happens, triggers within the class, you could do that. Or you could actually not inherit from anything at all. You just want a basic class that holds specific information for you that you want to access at any point in time. So that's what happens there. So also within the class, there are two things which I think we'll get to these two later because they are within um, the slide. So what? Let's talk about variables first. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of a variable before, but what do you? But yes, I don't. I'm sure most people have heard what variables are, but yeah, let's check what variables are. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place. It seems like. So, what is a variable? Think of a variable as a container, a digital container that stores information for you within within your PC's memory. So, think of a variable as a container within your PC, and then you can like store stuff within it. So, like for example, you want to store data concerning how fast your character is going. You store that data within that variable and keep it enclosed. And then maybe someone else needs that data for something else. You can pass that container onto that person. That person takes the data you've stored within it and can use that for something else. That's what a variable is. So we're going to write a simple script. Oops, that's is basically going to demonstrate that fact. So let's create a variable, and then um we'll call that variable my name. You could call, yes, so let's just call it my name. So you do a public string my name. That's it. Basically that's it. So public, the reason why we say public is you can create a private string. What a private string is a string is you can create a private variable, sorry. What a private variable is a variable that cannot be um, accessed from outside the the script you're writing in. So when you make something public, like I've done right now, I've created a public variable of my name, and usually variables come with types. So you can have a variable with a variable type. So there's string. String is usually for letters and words. And there's string, there's int. Think of int as integers. So integers usually for numbers, like whole numbers. And float. Float is for decimal numbers. So 0. 0.1, 1.0. Whilst int is for whole numbers. So that's 1, 2, 3. There's no pointing within them. Then there's also double. Double is usually more of the um, you can hold more decimal points or decimal places within a double than you can hold within a float. Which means if you think you're working with very minute detail like 0.0000003, then you instead of going with a float, you go with a double. Um, so you have to find out what situation you're running in, and then you pick the correct data type for it or variable type for it. We'll we'll be working more with variables because I'll be writing more code and you understand what each variable type is. And then so after we write public, which means now right now our variables available everywhere, we write string, which is a variable type we want to work with. After that, you write my name. You can write this any way you like. This is basically the name. This is where you name your variable. So I've called it my name. You can call it name. You can call it norm. You can call it uh, namer. You can call it anything. Like just call it something that represents what you want that variable to be, so that when you're reading your code or you're writing your code at any point in time, you know what it is you're doing. So, for example, right now we are creating a variable that's supposed to hold our names or whatever names we want to put inside. And that's what we've called it my name. So if you just want to hold a name, you can call it name. So that's how variables work. So it's usually um, the is it public or private? The access. That's what comes first, and then after the access, you have to type the data type. So is it going to hold numbers? If it's going to hold numbers, what kind of numbers? Is it a whole number? If it's a whole number, yes, then we want to work with integers or int. If it's not a whole number, if it's a decimal number, we would want to work with floats. But how are we working with a lot of decimal points? If yes, then we want to work with a double. If no, I think float will be more than enough. And then after that, what comes behind that is the name of the variable. So what's um, what's the name of your variable at that point in time? So does anyone have any questions for me concerning where I am right now?
Not from me.
That's for me. Awesome. No problem. So we've created a variable called my name. Now another thing also, like the public and private allows you to access it from multiple places. So when it's public, it means you can access it from outside the script. But when it is private, it means you can't access it from outside the script. Now I'll show you what that means live right now. And also you'll follow along with me. So basically what I want you to do is after you've written your variable name, so public string, and then the name of the variable. I want you to click.
Wait. I have a question.
Yeah, come again.
I have a question.
Yes. Okay. Sure.
What is the string the same thing as the variable?
No, the string is the variable type. So it's describing what kind of variable you're about to hold. So I said a variable is a container. Think of a variable as a container, but you want the PC to know what type of what kind of data you want to store in it, so that the PC knows what kind of container to give you. So if you're about to store words, it means you want a string container. So that's the string container that the PC gives to us, and then we're going to store the name within it. So think like wherever you see. So string is just a data type. So for example, if we needed like numbers, if we're going to work with numbers, we won't call string. We'll do public int, and then you can call it age. So now the data type is the data type we're working with is int, which is a number. It's a whole number. Remember, I said it's a whole number because we didn't say a public float age, because you can't be 12.5, but you can be 12 or you can be 13. So int is for whole numbers, and then the name of the variable. So we want to call the variable age. So public is for the access, int is for the type. The next part is what type of variable you want to hold. Like I said, there are multiple data types: the string, int, float, double, char, and you'd see more and even like when you're working with classes and Unity, there are multiple other variables you can work with, which you'd see within our code as we go on. So yes, that's what it is. So the whole thing is like this. The variable itself is this. This is actually a variable. The,
Okay.
the first part is just describing what you want the variable to be. The first part is describing the access. The second part is describing the type. And then now you call your variable by name. Okay, so this is my variable by name. So like I said,
One thing.
okay, yeah.
The semicolon. Why did you put there?
So You remember I told you syntaxes are the way the way you like you talk with your PC. So
Yeah.
think of that as punctuations within your code. So this is how the PC knows that okay, you've said something and that's the end of what you're saying. So when you put a semicolon there, it means that's the end of what you're saying. So right now you're telling it, okay, create a pub. I want a variable called my name of type string and I want it to be public. And then you put a semicolon and tell it that's the end of that line. Remember, I told you when you're writing code, it's working line by line. So the PC starts from the top, like your computer starts from the top, line one, line two, and line three, line four, line five, all the way to the bottom. So at line seven, basically, just you've written this on line seven, and then you put the semicolon at the end to tell you that's the end of line seven. That's all I want you to do on line seven. Now move to line eight. Line eight is an empty line, so we'll move to line nine, and then same thing. You have the public int age. You've declared another variable, and then you put an end to it and say, okay, that's the end of that. Does that make any
Okay.
sense? Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sure, but you're seeing these things, which is start frame, and then there's nothing behind it. So these green things, these I'm sure on Visual Studio it's blue, but anytime you see two forward slashes before like any text, that is a comment. That's so the PC regards that as not part of the code, but it regards that as a comment. So the comment is basically for you writing the code, and for anyone else who ends up maybe picking up your code, because it happens a lot. People think it doesn't happen, but you can write code, and 2 weeks later you can come back to it and be confused, like what did you do here? Like, why did you do this here? So, what you'd want to do is leave kind of bits of information that is not code to help you understand what you are doing at any point in time. So, for example, Unity is you are telling yourself that okay, this here is a start. It's called start, and it's called before the first frame. We'll talk about all that later, but basically, anytime you see two forward slashes before any text, it means there's a comment. You're putting a comment there for yourself. And like I said, comments are very important for future references and also for anyone else who, like, because usually most of the time you're working with multiple people on a project and maybe someone else is going to complete something or someone else wants to check why they can't access a variable and they come here and maybe the variable you called it a different name, but you wanted to describe maybe what it does because you called it some weird arbitrary name. So when you describe your variable or you describe your function, we'll get to functions later. Everyone knows that okay, this is the function I'm looking for, and then they can just dive straight without having to read all your code. So that's what these two lines are for. So yes, any more questions?
No.
Awesome. So we created two variables now. My name and age. One is of type string and one is of type int. Now I said I was going to demonstrate what these things are, what I meant by the access, um, why you can access it within or within the file or like outside it. So now when you've written all this, I want you to press Control S. That will save your code and then open up Unity. Now, when you open up Unity, Unity would lag for a few seconds. Now, this is because it's compiling the code you've written within your ID, which was Visual Studio Community 2019. So it would lag for just a few seconds. It depends on the PC you're using. Might be longer. And after that, you should click on Main Camera Sky, and you'd see two variables here: my name and age. And even they have two different like entries. Remember we said age was an integer and integers are whole numbers. So you can literally only enter like literally whole numbers. If you try and enter 12.5, you can't even enter a point. It doesn't even allow you to enter the point. It's literally just for whole numbers. And you can actually even like control it by using usually when you come close to it you see your mouse comes up with two arrows, horizontal arrows. So if you click and you drag, it will change the value for you. And you also have another variable called my name. Now that's a different type. It's not an integer, so it's not a number. It's a string, so you can't change it using numerical values. You need to type stuff in it. So that one, my name is Andy personally, so I would type Andy in it. Now, this is what I mean by when you make it public, it appears here. Now, if you go back to your code and you change one of the variables, any one of them, I leave it up to you. I'm changing my age. I'm changing that. I'm making that private. I don't want anyone to know my age. I don't want anyone to know I'm 120 something years old. So I changed that to private and I do Control S. Remember, always save your code before moving into Unity, or whatever you've done is not going to register within Unity. So I do Control S and I go back into Unity. Age doesn't exist anymore. It's there. My age is still there, but it cannot be accessed outside of the script itself because it's a private variable. Now, that's the difference between a private variable and a public variable. So, and it doesn't only extend to Unity, it extends outside Unity. So you can actually call on a different class. You can call on a class from a different script. So if you call on that, let's say I call on the test class in a different script, maybe a script related to something else, and I want to access the variables within it, I'll only be able to access my name, but I won't be able to access age. Now, the reason you want to do that is you only want things related to, you would want to do that. The reason why you'd want to do that at any point in time is because you want to keep stuff that is not related to anyone else private, which means stuff that no one else needs to touch, no one else needs to change, except for people within that script. Like maybe elements within that script are working with that, but anything outside it is not their business. So that's when you want to keep things private. That's why you keep it private. But if maybe that's usually the best way to do it, so that you don't end up writing code and maybe you mistakenly did something halfway and a variable is being changed without your knowledge. You definitely don't want that. So, especially when it doesn't need to be changed, that's when you make it a private variable. That means that no one else is touching it apart from anything else within that script, and then it works there, it stays there. But the variable still exists. You can still access it, and I'll show you in just a few seconds. So now that I've made my age private, I'm going to add. You can actually initiate you can actually give your variable a value when you initiate it from the beginning. So you can actually tell it that okay, because right now I can't change this variable anywhere else. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set a value for it the moment I initialize it. So initializing is like when you create the variables. When you create the variable straight up, that's initializing. Now you want to give it a value. I'm going to give I remember I said I was 120 years old and I didn't want anyone to know. So I'm going to say 100. Oh, no, not that. 120 years old. And I don't want anyone else to know that. So that's why I'm keeping private. But now I want to ask the PC, what is my age? Hold on. So yes, I want to ask the PC what my age is. So it's 120. And for my name, I already put my name inside Unity. Like it's a public variable, so I changed the value of my name inside Unity, and it's there now. So I don't need to change. I don't need to give the variable here an initial value because I can change it outside Unity. Now we are going to add. I'll explain what this does. Basically, let me just explain what it does. It's a function. So this here is a function. These two are functions. Think of a function as something you want to run multiple times, but you don't want to write it multiple times. We'll get to it, but we'll get to it so that I can give a better explanation. But think of a function as something that you want to encapsulate and call easily, so that you don't have to write multiple lines of code every time you want to do that specific thing or function you want to do. So what these two do, these are actually primitive. Or when I say primitive, I mean functions created or given to us by Unity. So what the start function does is like it says, this basically runs any script within the moment the game starts. So the moment the game starts, you want, maybe for example, you want to give your character 100 health. So for example, I could so you want to give a character 100 health. You would set that right here. You can also set that here, but maybe you'd want to change it on runtime. So you can actually come here and set it that, okay, no, my character's health is 100, but on this level I want it to start at 70. So on void start, when the game starts, it will take this value. The initial value would be, let's say, 100 or 120, depending on the health of a character, and then you can change the value here. As soon as the game starts, it will change from whatever value it was when you initialized it to the value you're setting it to on the start. So think of start as anything you want to happen when the game begins. The moment the game begins on the first frame, like the moment like anyone opens your game and starts, whatever you want to happen on the first frame, you put it right there within the start function. Now the update one basically what it does is for every frame, which is for every second your game is running. So games don't usually deal with seconds; they deal with frames, and usually you're running games at specific frames. So you have either use PS4s. That's the OG PS4s, the big ones. They run at games at 30 FPS. PS3 too also run games at 30 FPS. When I say FPS are frames per second, which means every second you're seeing 30 frames. Yes, so I was talking about frames per second. So yes, so I'm mentioning PS4 and PS3 because they are consoles, and consoles are usually restricted to 30 frames per second. So, the reason I've not mentioned PS5 is PS5 and the PS4 Pro, which was like the smaller, nicer version of the PS4. The reason why those were like really praised and everyone was so happy about those systems were they kind of pushed the limit and they were running games at 60 frames per second. Now, the reason why, so they were able to run games at 60 frames per second, which is more smooth. PC, you can actually run games at 240 frames per second. That's if your hardware can handle it. So now that means that every second, for whatever game you're writing or coding, every second you are handling whatever is within here is running as many times as your PC can render those number of frames per second. So if your game is running at 60 frames per second, every second, every second, whatever code is you've written within the update loop is being run 60 times. If you're running your game at 30 frames per second, whatever is here within your update code is run 30 times. So if your game is running at 120 frames per second, whatever is written here is running 120 times. So how that's what the update block is for. So it means that anything you want to be checking every second, for example, you want to be checking inputs because your character is moving, the player is moving the character, but so if the person presses the button, you want the player to move like instantaneously. So you're literally checking every frame, every second. That, okay, is the button pressed? Has the button been pressed? Has the button been pressed? Then now, if someone pressed the button, the question changes to: has he released the button? Has he released the button? Has he released the button? That's what you write within your update code. Your update block. Sorry. So we are going to put something within the start block. Basically, we want something to run the moment the game or the level starts. So what we're going to do is we're going to output the value for my name and age. So within your start block, we are going to write debug dot log into brackets. So debug.log, and then you create two brackets like open brackets, close brackets, and within those brackets you would want to write semicolon and no, did I say semicolon? No, inverted commas. Sorry. So you'd want to give an inverted comma, and within those inverted commas you would want to write my name is, and then the message you're putting. Okay, actually, Yeah, so the message you're putting there, you can change it up. It doesn't really matter. So you want to put my name is, and then you want to move outside of your inverted comma. So you're still in the brackets. You are still in the brackets. Hold on. Let me magnify this. If I can see. Yes. So as you can see, we are still within the brackets. Debug.log, and then inside this we have inverted commas within the brackets, which are saying my name is. So now we want to move outside of that inverted comma we added, and then we'll add a plus, and then we'll write the name of a variable. Name of a variable is my name. That's it. So debug.log, my name is plus my name. So basically, what the debug.log thing does is it logs whatever you put within it inside a window within Unity. So I'll show you that window. We didn't actually go through that window last 2 weeks when we're looking at everything that's available within Unity, but because we didn't need it at that time, but we need it now, so we're looking at it. So now that we've written this, so my name, which is the variable here, and then my name is, which is this is just a string we added. It can be removed. It doesn't really need to be there. I'm just putting it there to kind of make the text look nicer. So my name is plus my name. So Control S as usual. It has to always be within you. Anytime you write any piece of code you want to write, you always want to hold Control S before leaving. So Control S, and you remember the last thing. This is the end of the line. So we want Unity. We are telling the code that okay, that's the only thing that's running on this line. So semicolon. So back in Unity, nothing really changes as usual, but you go within. So remember last week we talked about each window within Unity. We talked about scene, hierarchy, game, inspector, project window. There was one last thing we didn't talk about, which was the console window. So the console window is where you see errors when you write your code and you are playing your game. If there's an error, that's where you see it. If there's a warning, like we are seeing a warning right now, that's where you use it. If you want to debug something too as well, like we did debug.log, this is where it comes to. It comes within the console. It logs it here within this place. Now it's giving me a warning that we created a variable called age, but we never used it. No worries, that's just a warning. It's not an error. So a warning is basically telling you either something is there. It could potentially break your game, but it hasn't yet. But you would want to look at it, but it hasn't yet. So, but then if you look at the warning, you know what warning you're looking at. You don't have to be scared all the time. For example, this one is just telling me that I haven't used a variable. There's nothing wrong with that. The only issue with that is whenever a variable is created, memory is being taken out, which is precious. Memory is precious within games because you're storing a lot of stuff every moment of every second. So it's just telling that, oh, like, please, if you're not going to use this variable, how about you take it out so that we can save some extra memory for something else. But we are not really doing anything serious, so don't worry about that. So clear. And now click on play. So the moment you click on play, within the console log, you should see my name is, and then the value you put within my name here. So hopefully you filled the variable, the value here. I filled it with Andy. You can fill it with whatever you want to fill it with. Now we click play, and boom, my name is Andy, and it's actually still running all the physics we set up in the previous class, which is awesome. But yes, my name is Andy. I hope everyone got the same outcome. If you didn't, or if you had an error, please let me know so that we fix it immediately.
I try it out to see if it works.
Okay.
Can you go back to your coding part?
Sure.
Thank you.
And don't worry about the message thing. This is just um something that writer does every time. You don't have to write message there. This is actually part of the code. I only added the semicolon. Sorry, the inverted commas. That's all you need to add there. So it's brackets, inverted commas, and then you write my name within the inverted commas, which is a string or a debug log, and then outside it you want to plus my name. So when you put a plus there, it means that you're adding something. Basically, think of it as taking. So what is happening is, remember I said is a variable is a container. So what is this? What is this? What it is that you're doing here is you're taking the container and putting it here. You're telling debug. You're telling debug.log to log this everything here. So what it's going to do is it's going to log this, which is a message you set up yourself. So my name is that's always that's a constant, and then plus the container variable containing the string value my name. So it's not going to write my name. It's going to open the container and take whatever value is within the container and then output it within the log. So every time you give something a variable, remember the variable is the container, but you're not going to show the container. You want to put it within the container. So whatever you're giving the variable to, it will open the container and look inside and take the values within it and use it. So if it's empty, so if we go back to Unity and we make it empty, it means that when you debug or log, it will become my name is that's it. There's nothing else. It will be an empty output. My name is, and then there'll be nothing there because there was nothing within the my name variable we set up. So that's how it works.
Okay. Where did it show again?
Oh, so yeah,
Maybe.
within Unity. So within
Yes.
Unity, you see a project window. You should see a console window beside the project window. So you click on that
Okay.
exactly, and then you click play, and it should log right there.
Okay.
So like I said, the variable is this. My name is just a container, and what is here is the value within it. So now if I'm supposed to make this empty and I play again, we should have a different message. It should just be my name is without a value there. So my name is empty because here is empty. That's how it works.
Okay.
Same thing with so it's the same thing with the variable age. Now remember I told you that when it's private, no one else can access it. No one else except everyone else within this. It's like everyone else within this test class can access it, but anyone else outside cannot. That's how the private variable works. So for if I'm supposed to come here, let's copy this line of code. We could actually put a plus there, but let's just put a plus there. So my name is Andy. Let's add another plus, and then inside that plus. Remember, if you want a constant like message, a message that never changes, you have to put two inverted commas there, and then write the message within it. So the first one is what my name is plus my name plus and sorry and I am and I am class H. So now we've created a message which is my name is, and then the variable which is the name over there, and then I am, and then the age. My age is 120 years. Remember, anything within this class can access that private variable. Anything outside this class will not be able to. So that's why you want to make something private or public. It means that's okay. This is no one else's business apart from tests, so no one else should be able to access it. No one needs to know what my age is anywhere else. That's why I've made it private. I don't want anyone else knowing. So now,
In my
yes.
there are a lot of syntax error stuff.
Ooh, what errors are we seeing?
Try to take a screenshot.
Okay.
They're like the warnings and then the 7 errors.
7 errors.
Yes.
That is a lot. Sure, no worries. So, just finishing up what I was doing whilst Jeffrey brings his errors so that we can fix it. So within, like I said, right now we are debugging what my name is and then the value within my name, and I am, and then the age. So remember, Control S every time, and then now we come here and I've changed the name from Anki to Dracula. Now we click play, and we should have a message saying, "My name is Dracula and I am 120." I guess you want to add yes would, but you get the point. So yes, that's basically how variables work. Now let's look at the issue with Zenon. So Zenon has shared his message screen. Give me a second. Let me drag this here. There we go. Oh my god. Okay, let's do that thing. Okay, so this is quite easy. So these are just errors with. So can I see your code actually? Don't worry about this. Let me see the code. So please take a screenshot of your code and let's look at that. How do you fix it here? But basically that's it for variables. So let me take Jeffrey through fixing his issues, and then we will be moving on to functions. Great. Okay. So that's where the issue is. I see the issue. So the first thing you did was within the start block, you did debug.log, which was correct, into brackets. My name is, but you didn't end the inverted comma should come at the end of the colon and not at the end of the my name. Do you get it? So yes.
Can you repeat that?
Hello?
Yes, Kabir.
Yes. Maybe if we could have Jeffrey actually help us step through his code just so that we can see what he was thinking when he was writing it, probably would be helpful to us as well.
Oh.
Or what do you think?
I mean, if he just started, so I don't think there's anything to really for him to actually tell us because he's just following my code right now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Jeffrey, do you see the issue I pointed out right now? So you didn't close the first my name is, you didn't close the static message within it. So it's supposed to be the bracket and then inverted comma my name is colon and then the inverted comma again to close that static message. Then plus my name plus you did it correctly in the second one. You realized you did it, you opened it, you closed it. But the first one you didn't do that. You opened it, you never closed it. Yeah.
So after the my name is colon, then I finish.
Then yes, exactly.
Okay. Let me try it.
So the idea with those like
They're all gone.
come again.
All the errors are gone.
Yes, exactly. So the idea behind those like inverted commas is to create a static message in there. So like whatever is in there is a static message. But you need to open it and then close it, just like you did with the brackets, for it to know that okay, this is the text I'm talking about. So why you started getting those errors was because you opened it and then you closed it to the PC. You actually closed it, and then you opened another one, but you didn't close the other one, which is the last one over here, right here, after the that was considered as an open but not a close. So that's how you had that issue. But we solved it. So hallelujah. So your code is running perfectly now, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's move on to the next thing, which is functions, if I believe. That's right. Functions. So I think I already mentioned functions in passing when we were looking at everything. So what is a function? Think of a function as you have a piece of code, or you have multiple lines of code like that do something. For example, you've written 15 or 20 lines of code that's supposed to achieve something like maybe grab maybe grab something or close a door. You've written a function to close a door. You've written 15 lines or 20 lines of code, and those 20 lines of code are meant to close a door. Like it's meant to help you, like the player close the door. So now it means that every time the player wants to close the door, or anytime you want to call on that, like anytime you want to do something like that, which involves closing the door, you would have to write those 20 lines of code again and again and again, multiple times. Now, a function allows you to put those 20 lines of code into kind of like a think I don't want to call it a container. It allows you to put it into like a director or a pointer. So like it's basically a tag. It's like a representative of those 20 lines of code. So now anytime you want to call like that function to close a door, all you have to call is that one function you created. You just call that function, and that function will go and speak to all those 20 lines of code, and those 20 lines of code will execute and then come back again. So that's what a function is. A function basically allows you to extract codes that you kind of write multiple times into like a one-liner, and then all you have to do is now just call that one line, which is just the function you're calling, instead of always having to write those 20 lines of code multiple times. That's the idea of a function. Oops. Wrong place. So we would actually go through it now. So let's go to our script and let's create a function. So when we were you remember we're talking about the void start and void update and all that. So when you're creating a variable, you want is the syntax you're working with is public, again, our favorite friend, our new favorite friend. It used to be the Spectre window, but now it's public and private. Public void, and then the name of your variables. The name of your function. So what we want to name our function is, what is my name? Again, you can call your function anything you want. You can call your function anything you want, but I am calling it what is my name. So think of the so public is basically again describing what kind of function you're creating. When you don't, for example, with the start and update, it was literally just void. When you do that, it means it's a private variable. You don't want anyone accessing, which indeed you don't want anyone accessing these two variables outside the current script you're writing, because they are very delicate scripts. So not most of the time, you want them to be private every time. But if you're writing maybe a function that is going to be used outside the script, you would want to make it public. Now, this doesn't work the same way as the variables work, where when you make it public and you enter Unity, you see it there. No, it doesn't work like that. It's different in terms of it's just allowing other people to be able to access the function you've written here as well. But most of the time, you want your variable, your function to be private if you know no one is going to be using it. It's not. It's not just. It's not for anything. It's not unlike the variable. It's not for anything where maybe you want to store save memory or anything. But it's just cleaner. It's cleaner like that. So your code ends up being cleaner where anything that is not anything that no one else is going to be using just the class you're in, you want that to be private and anything else will be public. That's how it is. So public void is how you call on the function. That's the keyword for creating a function in C#. So public void, and then what is my name? So this is where the name of your function comes in. What is my name? And then after that, you have two small brackets and then two big brackets. So I'll explain what these two do. So think of these small brackets as you can create variables within these functions within these two within these two brackets right here. So for example, if I want to pass something down to this function, I can say, sorry, it might be a little bit confusing, but you get it. Hopefully you get it. So what I'm going to do is I've created a variable called name, so this variable called name is what we'll be using within the function called what is my name. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this piece of code, which is debug.log blah blah blah, drop it right here. You could just what you could do is, so what we're going to do is we'll copy this line of code, right click, cut it, and paste it here. That's what we're going to do. So now we've taken the code of debug.log, my name is blah blah blah, and we've moved it into our function what is my name. So now it's the function what is my name that's carrying this value. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to change, actually let's forget this for now. So I'll explain the parentheses later. But yes, so public void what is my name, into parentheses, and then debug.log, my name is blah 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 blah. So my name is my name, which is the variable my name, and I am 120. I think I'll have to add years so that the English makes sense. Years. Oh. Great. So my name is my name, and I am 120 years old. Again, this variable is private, so no one else can see it, just us. And remember me talking about being able to change the variable as soon as the game begins. You can do that within the start. So now what we're going to do is we're going to change out the variable of age. I will make it 100. So now it's going to be, right now it's age at 120, but when the game starts, this variable will change from 120 to 100, which means what we should be seeing here is my name is Dracula and I am 100 years old. Now we've created a function. All right, we have a function called what is my name, but we haven't told Unity what to do with it. It's just existed. So in order to let Unity know what to do with it, you would want to do what you do is you call it. And remember what I said? I said what a function allows you to do is allows to put all those 20, 50, 100 lines of code you used to write somewhere into kind of like a pointer. And then what will happen is wherever you are, whenever Unity sees that thing, it knows that, oh, it's talking about those 20 lines of code we're writing. We've written only a one line, but I guess you get the point. So instead of us having to write debug.log, blah, 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 all we have to do here is literally write what is my name? That's all. Just that's all we need to write. So we actually this is where we call the function what is my name with my brackets. You always have to add the brackets. Now I'll explain what the brackets are after we're done with the first part, which is actually working with the function. So what is my name? So all you have to do is just call what is my name. Again, your function name could be different. It doesn't really matter. You can call this anything. You can call this Billy. Like I can literally come here and refactor this, rename it, and call it Billy. It doesn't matter. But most of the time when you're yes, I renamed the function and I made it rename here. But most of the time when you're naming a function, you want to name the function something that is readable, so that the next time you go and you come back, you know what that function does just by looking at the name of the function and not having to read all the lines of code within that function. So yes, writing things legibly is very important when writing code. Both this and also your comments help a lot. It's all for you in the future. So the next time you come, you don't have to fall into what is going on. You don't have to ask yourself what is going on because you can literally read it. You don't have to be like, don't mind all those movies where they're like, oh, he opens up the code and he's reading it and he understands. That's a lie. That's a lie. what you want is a clear, readable code that someone can actually look at without having to actually read all your code. He understands, okay, this function is doing this at this point, or this function is doing that at that point. So we're going to change this from Billy back to what is my name. Now, what is my name is literally makes sense. It means it's a function that's asking what my name is. And again, within the distance, it's literally asking what your name is. So again, like I said, it has to be ingrained within you. Control S to save. So it's before leaving your editor back to Unity. So now we're back in Unity. Again, I told you Unity will take a few seconds to compile the information you gave it. And when it's done, usually it won't tell you it's done, but when it's done, you can click on stuff, it means it's done. But when it's not done, you can't click on anything, which means it's still processing. That's how it works. So we are back in Unity. Now remember, what's the first thing I did? I changed the value of age from 120 to 100 as soon as the game starts. So right now the value is 100 when the game starts. It should be 100 when the game starts, even though we've written 120 here. So let's click on play and we should see my name is Dracula and I'm 100 years old and I'm 100 years old. I'm 100 years old. Forget the grammar. We all understand what this means. So my name is Dracula and I'm 100 years old. That is great. So another thing I'd like you guys to see, remember I spoke about sequential or procedural, not procedural, progressive. It was procedural. Sequential coding. So right now I told you it's line by line, which means this line executes and then this line executes and this line and then this line. So which means by that logic, if we move this down here, it means that this value should run before this, which means even though we are setting age to be 100 within start, which is being run as soon as the game begins, we should see the value of 120 when this function is called, because this function, which is being called, takes the code here, runs this code, finishes it, and then comes back here to change the value from now 120 to 100. So again, control save, and yeah, you do a lot of control saves today. Control save and play. So now instead of it being 100, you should see 120, even though we set it to 100 within the start. But now you get the point of it moves from line to line. So if you want to, when you're writing your code and you want to achieve something, and something is not working how you want to, check and see, did I write it according to the sequence in which I wanted to run? Do I want the age to change before the name comes? If yes, you better move this up and then now age will change to 100 before the function, which is what is my name, runs. Now, the next thing we're going to be looking at is what do these two brackets do? So I'm sure everyone's like, what do those two brackets do? Why can't you just? So you can leave them empty. That is if you have nothing to reference or pull within your function. But you can actually create a function which is locally used within, which is you can create a variable which will be locally used within your variable. I can literally create a variable called no, you don't want to do that. Just do that. So you want to create a variable called my name. You create a variable called name. Sorry. So what you've done is you've created a local variable called name. Now this variable can only be used within these two brackets. It can only be used within these two brackets. If you call the variable here name outside these two brackets for this function, it will give you an error. You've made a local variable. So that's what these things are. These brackets are for. If you have a script here that requires inputs from an external source and you want to put that external source into it, all you have to do is just create a variable which you can just feed that external information into these two brackets, and then it will run here. So for example, we created a variable called name, which is a local variable for this function. So now we are going to change the variable, which is my name, which is the global variable here. We'll change it to this one. We'll change it to name. So let's change it to name. Oops. There we go. So now we've we've created a variable called name, and we've called it here name. So public void what's my name into bracket string name, which is a local variable for this function. So now every time what's my name is called, it would run debug.log my name is name, which is the variable which is supposed to be passed here. So right now if you look up here, you would see that there's kind of like a red line, which means there's an error in your code. So what the error is, there's supposed to be a value in here. There's an argument, there's a parameter in here which is not being fulfilled, which is the value is supposed to be passing into it. Right now it's empty. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass the variable my name into it. So we're going to pass the variable my name into that. So now what is happening here? What we are doing is we've created a variable called what is my name. And we've created a function called what is my name with a local variable name, which is a parameter that will be used within the function. Now, why you'd want to do this is it means you have external information or something you want to get from somewhere else, and that will be used within this function. But you cannot store that information within this function. It has to come from an external source. That's why you create a parameter here to be able to use the information that's coming from wherever it's coming from. So what we've done is, now that we've created the function called what's my name with the parameter name, we are now given the local variable here name, the value of the global variable my name. Now it could be my name. I can also call it, I can literally just give it, remember it's a string, so I can literally just call it Andy. Like I can literally just put the string there, Andy, and it is literally fulfilling the value of what is supposed to be here, which is a value that I'm giving to the local variable name. So now what's going to happen is, what is my name? When what is my name is running, when this is supposed to run, it will run this, take the value of Andy, and move it here. So when the value of Andy is moved here, whenever you debug.log, that same value is what's being, the value that you picked from here, that you've moved here, is the same thing that will be here. So,
Excuse me.
yes, Jeffrey. Do you have
Sorry, I have to. Even now it's 8. I have to do some stuff.
Oh, okay, no worries. We're recording this, so it'll be available to you. Also, if you have any questions during the week that you have to ask, you can still ask. So don't worry about that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So, bye. So Yes. Where was I? So basically, you can pass the you can pass the string and d into a name, and then it will pass here. It's also the same way you can also pass a variable. So, and if you want to pass, you can pass the variable my name. My name is a container for a string value of my name, which is being provided within the editor because it's a public variable. So if you do um, my name will be moved here, which will be put within this. And then now when you run, it's going to be name, and then inside name, there's a variable called my name. And then inside my name is where the actual data is, which is what is going to be pulled out. So that's what these brackets are for. They are for the parameters. So if we again control save, like I said, it's going to be your best friend, and we move over to Unity, and now we selected Dracula and press play, and you should see Dracula and I'm 100 years old. Yes, so we've taken a look at what functions are. Like I said, this class is a lot. So next things are conditional. So what is a conditional? Think of a conditional as a fork in a road. So the road is your code, and the split or the the Y junction or the T junction is the thing. Yeah, think of it as a T junction within your road of code. So when your code is running, your code is the main road, and when it gets to the T junction is the conditional. So the conditional, it means that what the condition has to be met. So if maybe you are driving, which is the code, you get to the T junction, and the condition is the color of the shirt red. And if the color of the shirt you're wearing is red, it means that like the condition is what's the color of the shirt the driver is wearing. So we're checking if the color of the shirt is red, you should turn right. But if the color of the shirt you're wearing is not red, which means it could be any other color, blue, green, whatever, you should turn left. That's what the conditional does. It's basically, think of it as a fork or a T junction within your code that requires certain conditions to be satisfied, and if those conditions are satisfied, well, if whether or not those conditions are satisfied determines where you turn to next for your code to continue. That's where conditional is. So we're going to look at the basic conditional, which is the if and else statements. So sorry about that. So what we're going to do is, remember I said we have a lot of like values within our code, and this is where like the function of the main ability of a function shines. We're going to write a conditional within our function block, or within our what is my name function block or method block, and that's where that's what we'll call at the top here, which is what is my name. So again, we won't have to write everything we're about to write right now. All we have to call is what is my name here, and then it will run everything we're about to write here. So how do you work with conditionals? A conditional is basically an if or else. So you do if, and then you write your condition within these two brackets. Brackets are very important. So you write your condition within those two brackets. So now we want to check what if. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to check the value of the variable my name. So now we're going to check if the value is empty. If it's empty, we'll want to say something. Maybe we'll want to say, please input a name. You didn't put a name. But if it's not empty, we'll say something else like, okay, your name is whatever value you put within my name, and then you are this age old. So now how we check for if that value is empty is string dot null. It's null or empty. So what we are doing is we are checking the variable for so right now what we're doing is we're calling on the string type, and in the string type there's a function. Again, it all comes back to each other. There's a function within the string which was already made for us by Unity, which is called is null or empty. It's basically explaining what the function does. This function is checking if the string or the value you're putting, the variable you're putting within it is checking if it's empty or not. So right now we're putting the variable my name into this function's parameters. So we are checking if the variable my name is null or empty. So when you do that, you create two new parentheses, and what is happening here is if string dot is null or empty, it is null or empty, and what are we checking if it's null or empty? My name. So what happens here? If it's true, so if this value is true, whatever is within here will run. Else, if it's not, which means if this value is not empty, this would rather run. Now there's a better way of handling this, but we'll talk about it later. It doesn't really matter. Both situations work. So right now we're going to say, okay, check if my name is empty. If my name is not empty, run this script, which means like my name is not empty, so I can now call my name is the variable which you're providing. But if your name is empty, what we want to do is we want to give them a different message. That message would be, let's copy this code so we don't have to write it all over again and paste it here. So now that message would be, we can let go of all that, and we can create a static message within our inverted commas saying please enter any. Please enter any. So let's run through this. We've created a function called what is my name. So now imagine you having to do this every time you want to check if if your name is empty. Or if you want to check what your name is, imagine having to write an if statement every time. This is like, well, how many lines? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 lines just to check if your name is just to check your name, and it's checking if your name is empty or not to make sure to give you your name. So right now, what is my name? It's checking the variable my name. If your name is empty, if there's no value within my name, it will tell you to please enter a name. But if there's a value, it will tell you what your name is, and it can also give you your age coincidentally. So we've created our function fully here, and then we are calling it here. So now anytime we want to call this, we want to check if any variable is empty or not, and we want to check maybe someone's name, what we have to do is just call what is my name, and then pass a string variable within the parentheses here, and that's what will be passed down all the way to the end. So to keep consistency, let's change. So now we have so I literally just changed this variable from my name to name. It doesn't change because what's happening, we are passing my name into this function called what is my name, and that's what is the same, that's being encapsulated by the local variable called my name. So right now, anytime we run it, we are putting this variable my name into this container called name. And now if we are checking if name is empty, we are also checking if my name is empty because we put my name within name. So name will check itself, will realize that there's another variable within me, and then it will check that variable, and then it will check the value of that variable. If there was another variable within that variable, it will check that variable like a Russian doll. But if there's no other variable, it would see the data within it and check if the data is empty or not, and so on and so forth. Now, Control S again, as usual. Save. Now come back to Unity and click play. Now watch the console again and click play. My name is Dracula and I'm 100 years old. Great, same thing. But now let's take away the name. Let's make this empty. Remove the name Dracula. So now the variable my name is empty, which means we're checking the variable is empty. So now if we press play again, please enter a name, which is checking the condition. So now we're checking the condition. Is name empty? Yes, name is empty because we didn't put the value here. we can edit it here. So now we checked and saw that it was empty, and it gave us the value of please enter a name, which is what we set here. So now it's checking the string null or empty. If it is, please enter a name. If it's not, it will give you your name because it has your name. Basically, that's how conditionals work. Sweet. Next one we have is loops, I think. So finally loops, but you don't have to. We'll not really delve into loops because we'll not be using loops within this class. They are a little bit more complex. We can tackle that in another course where we are doing something that involves maybe arrays or anything like that. That would be great. But for now, no loops. But we'll still describe what a loop is. So think of a loop as any code you want to run multiple times again and again and again and again until something is met. Now the difference between this and an update loop is the update loop doesn't care. There's no condition being checked. If it is literally running that code within it again and again and again. But the loop is running and then checking. There are multiple kinds of loop. There's what's my loops? But basically, there are loops where the do, there's the else, there's the while, do while. Those are the loops. Those are the different kinds of loops you have. And each loop has what it does. Some loops check before they run. Some loops run before they check, and so on and so forth. So again, it depends on the situation you are running or the problem you are facing or whatever it is you want to achieve. That will determine what loop you want to call or what loop you want to use. And again, this is always there's a condition. So we'll check the condition and then run. If the condition isn't met, it depends on you. If the condition is met or isn't met, you can run it accordingly. So maybe if the condition is not met, it will loop again. But if the condition is met, it will continue and then you can continue the rest of your code. That's basically what a loop is. So now, after talking about all the stuff about characters and all the code and introduction to programming, let's take a break and talk about characters. But if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to ask so that I help you with it. Are there any questions? Anyone?
No question from me for now.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so for creating a character, we need to import assets again. So remember we imported a few assets the last time, which was the environment and everything. This time we're importing something else, which is the character himself. So again, we took it upon ourselves to get you a few of these assets. So I'm going to share them into the whiteboard and you can access them anytime you want to use them. So please give me just a few seconds while I drop them within the whiteboard so you can use them.
Sorry, are you able to make your screen wider? Maybe the zoom size.
Oh, no, I've actually stopped zooming. So I have two screens.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah, so I have two screens. That's why I moved to the right. Yeah, don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't worry about that. Oh, sorry. Yeah. There we go. So I'm uploading it into the whiteboard. It's 3 megabytes. It's not big. It's not that big at all. So, cool. Okay, so I have uploaded the assets into the whiteboard, so you can just download this. Again, like I said, it's 3 megabytes, 3.83 megabytes, like 4 megabytes, nothing big at all. So the first thing we want to do is import the character. So now I think in the previous lesson, we talked about importing assets. It hasn't changed. It's still the same. Same old way of importing assets. But again, I'll take you through for those who weren't there, those who missed. So hold up a little for me. So we have so when you download the assets, you should have a zip file called Blue Wizard. So we're going to extract this zip file. So you just right click, extract to here. You should extract the file. Like yeah, it depends. For Mac users, you just double click on it to extract. But for Windows, if you don't have WinRAR, you might be in a loop. Yeah, so you extract that, and you should see a folder called Blue Wizard. If you open it, there's another folder inside called Blue Wizard. Forgive my mistake here, but yeah. So within it, you should see another folder called Blue Wizard, and within it, you should see multiple folders and animations within it. So yeah, that's what we're going to use. So like we said the last time, when you're importing something into Unity, let's go back to our projects view, projects window, and get our window explorer on top of Unity. Now all we have to do is just click and drag this into Unity. Drop it right into the project window. You should see the sign, the kind of like plus sign behind the mouse, and when you see that it means it's ready to be dropped. So all you do is just drop, and Unity would accept the files and start processing them, importing them, and processing them for use. So let's just wait a little while it does that. There are few animations there. So we've imported the folder called Blue Wizard, and within it there's a folder called Blue Wizard Idle, Blue Wizard Jump, Blue Wizard Walk, and animations. So I took the liberty of doing some for you, but we'll still go through making them, so don't worry about that. So what constitutes an animation in 2D? Think of a 2D animation as multiple images being think of an animation in 2D as a flip book. If any of you have seen a flip book before, it's literally animations in different frames that you just like hold and then like quickly like spray through all of them. Spray, like you kind of just hold it and allow it to flip quickly. So you flip quickly through all of them, and it gives the illusion of an animation of something moving. That's what a flip book is. That's the same concept you work with when you're creating animations in 2D, not just in Unity, but basically any 2D studio. Like it's literally multiple frames that still images that are being flipped through quickly. That gives it the illusion of movement. So it's the same thing we have here. We have multiple frames, and you can see like they're literally moving very subtly, like nothing. Like for example, here his eyes are closing, and they open again, and then he's standing there, he's still standing there. So that's literally it. Just multiple frames of different animation, like multiple frames of different images that you put together to create a full animation. Now, for this one, we don't actually remember in the previous lesson. What we had to do was we would click on the image, and then we would go into the inspector and change some things. We were changing the pixel the sprite mode from single to multiple and all that. That was because we had multiple images within one image, and we wanted to access all those multiple images. We wanted Unity to know that this isn't one image, this is multiple images within one image. So don't treat it as one image. But in this case, we have one image, literally only one image, which is the image of a character. So we don't have to change the sprite mode from single to multiple. We can keep it on single, and all of them are on single. By default, if you import anything into any image into Unity, any sprite image into Unity, it's always set to single. So you have to know, okay, maybe there are multiple images here, so I don't want it to be single, I want it to be multiple. You change it to multiple. But for every other image you import, it's always single. So you don't have to do any extra work on these images. It's already set. Now we are going to create a few animations. So I had a talk. There's actually, so basically in the end there were like multiple ways to handle this thing. I took one path, but then I had a change of heart during the week, and I think during the week or last week, I had a change of heart, and I decided to kind of swap to another way. The first way I did isn't industry standard, but is kind of shows you what you can do with code. The second one is more industry standard in terms of using the tools Unity has provided for you to efficiently create an animated character in Unity. So um, we're going with the second one. We're going with the first one because this class is all about coding, but we're going with the second one this time, which is the Unity standard, because we want you to keep to the standards of Unity. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create an animation called idle. Now we're in the idle block. Basically, I've already created all the animations for you. There's the idle, there's the jump, there's the walk and everything. But I want you to know how the animations are created. So we're going to delete one file, which is the animation file. So just delete this one. Just delete. Perfect, it's gone. Okay, so let's delete that. You can keep the idle. You can keep the second one. It doesn't really matter. Or if you want, you can just delete both so that you can feel more at ease. So all you should see within your blue idle wizard folder is just images, nothing else. So now what we're going to do is we're going to select the first image within the project window, and then just select, click on it. Don't click and drag, just click and let's go. And then go to the last image. Before you click on the last image, hold shift and click. It will select all the rest of the images within the project window. So with all the images selected, all you have to do is just click and drag this into the hierarchy view and drop it. When you drop it, it will ask you to create an animation. So again, we need to know what animation we want to create. So this folder is called what? Blizzard Blue Wizard Idle, which means this is animation of a character in idle. Idle is basically the animation that plays when no button is being pressed at that time. So when the player is not jumping or moving or running, that's the animation. That's the default animation that's supposed to play, so that everything doesn't look static. At least there's some kind of motion or life to it. So that's the idle animation. So for this one, again, we call it idle. Sorry, hopefully I can spell idle. Idle. So to make it much more defined, you can say idle anim or idle animation. It depends on you. So idle, you could do idle with an underscore. Again, it's all dependent on you. It's just a file name you're saving. It doesn't really matter. So we create an animation file called idle underscore animation and click save. You always want to be clear as to what that animation is doing. So right now this animation is an idle animation, and we know it. When we click on it, we know it. So you realize that within your hierarchy view, after you did that, the character was added the to your hierarchy view. So that's perfect. That's awesome. Let's just let's move him here because we know that we'll be playing around here. So let's move him around here. And let's drop him into the world nicely. Gonna fit right there. Great. So now we have our character. So now let's do some cleaning right here. Let's change the name. So that's basically it. If when you're creating a character, that's it. You select it. This is just for 2D, I must add. If you're creating a character in 2D, just select the first image within the flip. Select the last image. Select all. Select from like beginning to end. So make sure it's sequential, like 0, 1, 0, 1, 2. You can see the names at the bottom here. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. You want to select it sequentially, and then you just drag them right into the what do you call it, into your hierarchy view, and you should have your animation set up. It will bring a pop-up which will ask you to name the animation file. You name it, and that's it. You're done. If you want, we could do it again. So let's go with jump. So with that jump, let's take out these two. Again, we'll take out the jump and jump animation. Let's delete those two. And same thing, what we do is we select the first and then we select the last. Hold shift, select the last image, we select all of them. That's 7, right? It's 8, sorry. It will select all the 8 images, and then you just click and drag again to the hierarchy view drop. It will bring this thing again, the folder. It will bring the pop-up window where you create your animation again. Call this jump animation, and like I said, you want to call your animations stuff that like you would actually remember. So jump animation, save. Great. So the reason why I made us create 2 is that one thing that happens when you do this multiple times is it creates multiple of these things for you. You don't want multiple, you just want one. So let's do this one. Also, let's rename this form car blue idle 0000. Let's right click on it. You should see rename. Just click rename and call this player. You can call it anything you want again, but that's the player. That's the player that will be controlled within the game. So you want to call it player. So yeah, and also within our project window, we should see our jump animation as well. It also came with another one, which was the character wizard jump 0000. You can delete that one as well. Again, you only want to delete that one. This one, you like every time you do that, it comes with 2 things: an animation and an animation controller. That's what this is. You'd want to delete for the first one. You want to keep it, but for the rest, you'd want to delete all the other animation controllers because you'd only be working with one. If we were working with the first option I was talking about, we would have kept all these animation controllers because what we would have been doing was just basically switching between animation controllers. But I want us to understand what the animation controller does, so we will not be doing that. So it means we'll be deleting all the animation controllers we don't need. But we need this one, so we are not deleting this one. So let's rename this to player animation controller. If I spelled it correctly. Right. So that's basically how you create animation. So if we're supposed to do the same thing for walk, we would select from the beginning to the end and drag it there. Then delete that value, whatever value is created, they will delete it, and we want to keep player as well. And also delete the walk, this walk. We want to delete that and only keep the walk and delete the walk animation controller. And yeah, so I'm sure you're wondering, what is this animation controller? So the animation controller is basically a graph that allows you to set up how your animations work without even like you don't write code. It's basically allows you to set up how your animations would interact with each other right within um, right within a graph. So it's like a graph, and you can set like okay. So basically, you can set up that this animation moves from here, and then if and then maybe the next animation will be jump, and the next animation will be walk, and so on and so forth. So I'll take us to the animation controller. We'll end on that, and then next week we'll add the code that is required to help the animation controller work. So let's start by double clicking this animation controller. It should replace your scene, not necessarily replace, but you should have another tab within your scene view area. You should have scene, asset store, and then animator. Yeah, so that's please the asset store, don't click on it. Okay, you can click on it, but basically the asset store here allows you to access a store provided by Unity. So if you want to maybe buy an asset or something or anything like that, you can get it right from here without having to open your website any websites. You just get it from here. That's the idea of the asset store. But again, we're not working with that. So let's go straight into the animation controller. Um, First of all, does anyone have any questions before I start working with the animation controller?
No question for me.
Okay, awesome, great. So now we are within the entry point of our. So within the animation controller, you'd see when you open it, you should see these four things. Usually, you see four things. You should see an entry, any state, an exit, and then basically the default animation that was created when you created your the default animation you created that was created when you created your animation controller. So it usually defaults to that idle or whatever it is you created with it. So for us, it's with idle. If your animation controller was created with your jump, you would see jump animation, but that animation was created with that animation controller. But again, that's besides the point. So entry. Entry is basically when the game starts or when this animation controller starts running, what is the first or default animation it will come to? In this case, it will be dropping right here, which is an idle animation, which is great. Now, it's default, which means that if every time you press play, it should literally move from entry into idle. But it's not working because it's actually working. If you look on the right side, you should see the character blinking. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, right there. Perfect. Great. So that is what the animation controller does. So basically, entry is like when the game starts. This is what it will literally start with the first animation it's been connected to, which is idle animation. Now, what the animation again, what I said there, like I said before, the animation controller allows us to set up how the animations would move, like a graph of how the animations would be moving. Like for example, from idle, how would you move to run? Or is there a transition between idle and run? Is there when you're jumping? Is there a jump? Um, yeah, think of it like so. For example, if you're about to start moving, which is like an animation we'll add. Let's say we add the animation for walking, which should be around here. So let's add the walking animation. So this is a walking animation we've added. So we can add a transition from idle to walk, and we can also add a transition from walk to jump. So that's basically all that's happening. You're just literally setting up transitions. So you can see from idle you want to go to walk, and then you can set a reason why you should move from idle to walk at any time. And then same thing, you can set from walk to jump, and then you can set from jump back to walk. So like I said, it's a graph that you're just setting up to let animation know what should be working and how animations work. So basically, for example, maybe from idle, you can go from idle to walk. You can go from walking animation to a jump animation. You can go from a jumping animation to an idle animation. You should be able to go from a jump animation to a walk animation. That means you are jumping, you are walking, and then you jump. And you didn't stop pressing maybe the forward button, which means you are technically kind of still walking. So when you land, it shouldn't end at the idle animation. You should go back to the walk animation, and so on and so forth. So that's basically what's happening. You're just setting up, okay, this should go here, this should go here, this should go here, and then you make the transition. But you have to set conditions as to why each and every one of them should be working the way they are working. So let's start with walking. So on entry, we enter idle. And then from idle, we want to be able to enter the walk animation from idle. So which means we will create a transition from here. So you write, so in order to make a transition, you right click on the animation you want to start the transition from. So for in our case, we are starting from the idle animation, sorry. So you click on make transition, it will give you an arrow. And the arrow is always, you don't have to click, it's always stuck to the mouse wherever you go. Now, if you want to set it to something, just move it to the animation you want to set, like you want to transition to. It would automatically stick to it. Just move to it, will stick to it. So right now we want to move to the walk anim. So we just move our mouse there, it will stick to, and then you just click, it will stick to it. Now we set the transition from idle to walk. Perfect. Now the transition we've set, we have to set. Right now is great. We've set the transition, but how would it work? Like there has to be conditions that have to be met before we'll be able to move from idle to walk, or is this transition would just be weird? It means basically what we set up. I think what if I'm correct, what we set up right now is basically when the idle animation ends, it should start working, which is not what we want. We can test and see if that's the logic we've set up. Yeah, exactly. So the idle animation plays and then the walk animation plays. That's what we did right now. So, which is not what we want. We don't want the game to always be working at any point in time, which means you need to set conditions that would stop the idle animation from going to the walk animation when it's not needed, and then allow it when we require it. So in order to set the conditions, you just have to click on the transition. So you click on the arrow. When you click on the arrow, the color changes from white to blue, and then you should see again in the inspector window your favorite friend. You should see this nice UI. So you should see transitions, idle, walk. It has exit time, settings. There's a drop down for settings. Just click on it, and so on and so forth. So there are a few things we want to do. We want to put off has exit time. We also want to put off fixed duration. Um, yeah, don't worry about the rest. And transition duration. You want to put that on 0. So you want it to snap. So basically, what we are doing is has exit time. Exit time is basically, for example, this would have been great if you're working on a 3D game, because you know when you're working on a game in 3D, you just don't want the character to stop. You want to have like a kind of like a linear kind of feel. Like for example, you when you're walking, you don't just stop on a dime. Like you have like a kind of like stopping walk. Like for example, you want to stop walking, you kind of put your leg down in the middle and then you stop, something like that. So that's the exit time. Kind of the exit time allows for that um, exit of animation, like a short window to kind of give it that natural feel. We don't really need it. It's a 2D and it's a 2D game. We don't have all that luxury to be playing around. So we want to put off exit time, fixed duration, and also transition duration. You want to put it off. Transition duration is literally you're giving it extra time to kind of like blend between walking and idling. But again, it's a 2D game. We don't really care about all that, so we can put that off. Maybe the next time if we're working in a 3D space, all this would be useful. We can keep them on. Or even if you're working with an artist that has like extra animations for like maybe transitioning from idle to walk, that would be great. But for this one, we don't have all those extra stuff, so we don't have to worry ourselves. So now, after setting all that up, we'll have to come to the conditions. So now you can see that because we put off exit time, it's telling us that transitions need to have at least one condition or an exit time to be valid. So, which is what we are going to do. We are going to add a condition. So, in the conditions box, you should see a plus and a minus. Click on the plus, and you should have a condition. So, in order to have a condition, you need to add a parameter to your animation controller. A parameter is basically think of a parameter as a value that is being watched, and then if that value goes beyond a certain amount, or if that value is false and then becomes true, so it's basically a value you've created. And now what will happen is the condition is looking at that value. So you can set a condition that okay, um, the player speed is 0. If the player speed goes beyond 1, which is you can set that when I set it, you see. Basically, the parameter is just a value you have, and then you can set that okay, let's watch this value. If the value goes beyond a certain amount, then transition. If not, stay where you are. So let's create a parameter, a float parameter for speed. So let's go speed. Now, whatever parameter you create, you have to keep it in your head. There's a string value. You would understand that next week when we get into code. because this you'd literally be calling this string value within your code. So parameters always have to be at the top of your head and also very easily understandable. Speed, we all understand speed. If you want it to be a little bit more, make much more sense, you can do character speed so that you are safe. You go and you come back 2 weeks later, you know this variable, this parameter is checking character is the value for the character speed. That's all. So character speed. So let's go back to our transition. We've created a parameter called character speed. So now within our conditions, we can have a drop down, and you see it allows us to pick a parameter, the parameter we just created, which was character speed. We click on that, and now we can set we can set a condition. So this is literally as easy as it looks. The parameter is character speed. It's right now its value is 0. So every time you want to be checking within the animation controller, you want to be checking if character speed is greater than 0. So you can it's either greater or less than. But right now we don't want it to be less than, we want it to be greater than. So if character speed is greater than 0, it should transition to walk. That's basically it. You set your condition. You set your condition. So now this would always be looping within idle until this character speed goes beyond 0. Then the animation will swap from an idle to a walk animation. That's it. And again, vice versa. Right now, let's say we're in the walk animation. How do we get back from the walk animation into the idle animation? Same thing. You right click on the walk animation. Again, you want to right click on the animation you're about to make the transition from. So you right click on walk animation, click on make transition. It should give you an arrow. We want to make the transition from walk animation to idle animation. So now we set that up, and now you click on the arrow. So now first was what you have to be careful because the arrows very well. So the first one was what idle, which is going down. Now we want from walk animation to idle, which is going up. So you have to look at that. Now again, we need to set up some few things. Like I said, we don't want exit time, we don't want fixed duration, and we don't want the transition to be 0.25. We want that to be 0. So we set all that. We always have to set that up because it's on default, that's how it is, but we don't want that. So after setting those up, we come click on plus to add a condition within our within our conditional events area. And again, the parameter we want to work with is character speed. So we click on character speed, and because there's only parameter there, we'll literally select it for you. And then now we want to check if character speed is less than a certain value. We want to check if it's less. Now we can't check if it's less than 0, because if it's less than 0, because when you are not moving, you're at 0. So we want to check if it's less than 0.1. Remember, it's a float, it's not an integer. A float is for decimals, and integers are for actual whole numbers. So for this value, we can check if it's less than 0.1, which is what we want. So we're checking if it's less than 0.1. If it's less than 0.1, we want to make the transition from walk animation to idle animation. So that's like that. That's literally it. That's how animation controllers work. So now let's work with the other one for jump. Now jump is a little bit tricky because sometimes the player isn't necessarily jumping. He didn't press the jump space bar. He might have just walked off the ledge, right? If he walks off the ledge, he's in a jumping state. He didn't jump, but he's in the air, so he's kind of like in the jumping state. So in that situation, we know that there's a box here called any state, which means we could be walking and then maybe we fell off. We can enter jump. We can be standing and then maybe the world splits into two and then we fall through the world. We should be able to enter jump. So basically, you want to be able to enter the jump animation from any state, whether it is we are on the walk animation, idle animation, and animation, whatever it is. We want to be able to enter the jump animation from any of those states. So that's why this is here for us, any state. So now again, we want to make the transition from any state. So now we don't have to do this, make transition here, and create two different conditions for each transition. We don't have to do that. We just do those two, and then just say any state. So make a transition from any state into the jump animation. And again, we want to check all those values. We keep on checking. Turn off fixed duration, exit time is off. Thankfully, transition duration is 0, and now we want to add our condition. Now, this condition doesn't have anything to do with character speed. It has something to do with in the air. Are you in the air? We can check if you're in the air. We can check if you're on the floor and if you're in the air. That's what we are checking. So that doesn't have anything to do with speed. It just has to do anything with true or false. Are you in the air? It's literally I'm asking you, are you in the air? I could ask you, are you jumping? That's also a very valid question. But then someone could interpret, are you jumping as to you can only jump once a place pressing the space button. So if the person didn't press the space button, he's not jumping. So we want to check, are you in the air? If you're in the air, then we'll play the jump animation. So we can add another parameter for a bool. A bool is a data type for just true and false. True and false. That's a bool. Is it true or is it false? So we click on the bool and we can call the bool is in air. Okay, you know what, to make it easier so that when I come, I know what you're looking at. You want to call it is jumping, basically. So, I mean, I remember saying, yes, I said that it could be restricted as you didn't press the space button, but I guess it's still the same. Are you jumping or not? If you're jumping, you're in the air, so it kind of fits. Because writing is in air is actually quite arbitrary, but if you're jumping, it actually makes much more sense. So let's call this variable jump. So now you can see that it's a different type. With character speed, we had a value of 0, and we could 0.0. But with jumping, it's just a bool, like just that. Oh, for another thing, we can actually test our conditions without actually having to write code. So we can press play and let's yeah. So right now our character is in the idle state. We can kind of zoom into him a little. It will be a little bit blurry, but don't worry. So we have our character blinking, very cute, nice. Now let's change this value. Remember we said if it's greater than a certain value. So let's change this value from 0.021 and press enter. So he has entered the animation state, but it's not playing. I have no idea why. But if I set it back to 0, if you look at his legs properly, they kind of switch back. So that's more of an issue with code, I'm sure. Like, we'll have to go to the code to check that out. But yes, yeah, it's just a code. But yes, you know that your animations were because when you send it to more than 0, it kind of switches, and when you send it back to 0, it switches back to the idle animation. So this isn't complete. To complete this, you need to add a layer of code. So that's why he's not responding, but that's basically how it works. So, like I said, remember we said character speed, and we had a value of 0.0, which was a float. But then for his jumping, it's a bool. We said bool, we chose a bool, and it was given us a checkbox actually. So what is happening with this checkbox is if it's checked, it means it's true. And if it's not checked, it means it's false. It's false. That's the idea behind the bool value. So true and false, that's basically it. So what we are checking is the character in the air. So we'll change the condition from character speed in the transition from any state to jump animation. For character speed to is jumping. And we want to check if the character is jumping, which is true. We want to move from any animation state we are in right into the jump animation state. Straight up. Let's make sure our settings are already. Our settings are great also. So now the condition is what? If we are if it's jumping is true, we want to move from idle to animation. How we'll set if jumping is true or not, again, it's within the code. We'll handle that next week. But basically, that's the idea here. And finally, from jump animation. So let's say we move from any state into the jump animation. How do we get out of the jump animation? So now this is where we can set the transition back to a specific animation. So now let's say you drop, we can set it accordingly. So let's say you landed and you stopped moving. So you can set that to an idle. So this is Yeah, you are explaining that. And let's say you dropped, but you didn't stop moving. Like you kept on pressing the forward button. It means that when you land, you want to move right back into walk animation. So you can't go back to any state because it doesn't remember the state you are in. It's moving out of any state, but it can't enter any state. You have to enter the specific state you want to go back to when you're done with this animation. That's why we need to move it back into the specific animations and not back into any state because any state doesn't keep the state you are in. It keeps the current state you're in. If you go back to any state, you're literally just looping it back and forth. You're just letting the jump animation loop. We want to move from jump to another animation when we are done. That's what we want to do. So let's say we want to check jump animation. How do we move from jump animation back into walk animation? To do that, again, we want to put off all these useless things. So turn off as exit time, turn off fixed duration, and also turn off transition duration. This is good. Like transition duration is great as I am, but again, we're not supposed to be working there. So yeah, we can't really use it. It's great when you're working in a 3D game, for example, because 3D in 3D you really want that transition, that smoothness. You don't want everything to be like you don't want everything to be instant. You want to ease into it, and transition duration helps perfectly with that. You can actually even take the transition duration and actually split it into four. I've actually done this before. So you can split it into four and take the percentage out and say like, okay, if the animation is 75% done with the duration, with the transition, I want you to do this or do that. Maybe add an effect on the floor for maybe a drop or something like play a sound so that you can have like a specific kind of feel. But then again, we don't really need this here, so we put it on 0. So conditions. Let's add conditions. Now we want to add 2 conditions now. You can add multiple conditions. This is something that I'm sure maybe someone that have a question on it, but you can add multiple conditions. We are almost done, I promise. Let's just finish with this and we'll be done. So let's add, we're adding 2 conditions. We want to be checking if our character is jumping. If our character is not jumping, which means our character is false, our character is not jumping, and our character speed is less than 0.1. So now it has to check 2 conditions and it has to check 2 conditions. It has to check if our character is not jumping. It has to check if our character speed is less than 0.1. So when it checks these 2 and these 2 check out as correct, it would move from the jumping animation into the idle animation. But if we're in the jump animation, but if we're in the jump animation, and again we need 2 variables, and its jumping is false, but our character speed is still greater than 0, then it means we want to transition back into the anim state. Do you get what's going on? So basically it's a true and false that we are running here. So if both values here are true, it will move to idle. But if both values here if one of the values here are false, it will move to walk. Unfortunately, only one value would be the same all the time, which is jumping. Jumping will be false always because you stop jumping. You want to move from the jumping animation. But the character speed is what will be changing. Are you still pressing the button to move? If you are still pressing the button to move, then we'll be going into the walk animation state from the jump animation. But if you're not pressing the button to move when you're landing after your jump, you would move straight into the idle animation. So that's it. We've actually built an animation controller right now, and it's already set up. So, and another thing, when you created your character, that animation controller was added to your player. So this was added to your player. But if it wasn't added, you need to add a component called an animator. So right here, remember we were adding components in the last few what do you call it, classes. We're adding the components for the let's go back to the scene. We're adding components for the box collider and everything. So we want to add if let's say your animator didn't come, what powers the animation is an animator, and what is controlling the animator is the animation controller. So it means you need to add an animator. So you just come, you click on add component and you look for animator. Not an animation, but an animator. The animator is what is animating that thing. So you were looking for an animator. I can't add it again because I already have one. will give me a one. You can only add one animator as one at a time. So if you click on animator and this place is empty, then you click on the animation controller you just created, which is this one. You can double click to check if that's the one you want to add. So for example, I double click on this, it shows me this graph, and I'm like, okay, this is the animator controller I want to add. So I just come back, click on my player, and drag this onto the player animation controller, and that's it. That's if it didn't do that already for you. But because of what we did, how we're setting up the animation, it has already done that for us, so we don't have to worry about that. Yeah. So that's basically it. That's how you set up an animation controller. So next week, what we'll be doing is we would be looking at the code that will be powering. So we place the character within the scene. We edited the character placed in the scene. When I say edited, it means we changed the name from Kara Blue Wizard 0001 to player. So that's how we named it, if you can see right there. And we added components to the game object. So we added the animator, like I said, that was the animator we added. So these ones, so we've already added an animator. So the next one we need to add is a rigid body and a capsule collider, but that will be when we are working in code. Like those will be very useful when we are working in code. So for now, let's end here and continue on Saturday. Actually, we'll have to reach out to you guys because Saturday is kind of like a holiday, safe much. So it depends if you guys are still down, we can, but if you guys aren't, we can move it to a different date and do it again. Kabiru will reach out to everyone so that we know if that's going to
Yeah.
happen or not.
I think we should plan as though, Saturday will be happening, just so that, it will just be 2 hours.
Yeah.
We feel sad that we'll be taking part of your day, but then I think it's also, or maybe we could actually choose between, say, Saturday or Monday.
Okay.
But then I'll send a message on the group to just check with everyone to see what the preference is.
Sure.
Yeah, Hussein, what would your preference be? Saturday or Monday?
Weekday. I go to school weekend, so most times I'm in class when I'm joining.
Okay, so even on Saturday you'll be in class?
Yes, but I prefer weekdays. Like
Okay.
weekdays, I can dedicate the evenings.
Okay, it may be out. So what we'll do is we'll check with the rest of the team members and see, and we'll check with Jeffrey and see what his preference is to as well, and then we will communicate that too. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks a lot for saying. Really appreciate your enthusiasm.
Okay, everyone. So thank you for coming. That's the end of the class for today. So like I said, like this class is really packed. So next week is like we'll delve into like a lot of components as well. There we'll be adding extra components for the capsule collider, rigid body. We already did rigid body in the last week, so you kind of understand how it works. But now we'll be working with it in tandem with code. So that's like an extra level. But then again, you shouldn't be afraid. It's going to be really fun. Like now you'd see a character moving live with working with your animation controller, and that's literally the beginning. So our animation controller looks small, but it can be very expansive. That's if you have multiple animations running, but unfortunately we only have 3 animations because we are not animators, so yeah, we work with what we have. But yeah, so this is just the basics so you understand. So if let's say you find someone who's good in drawing or animating, you can kind of work with him, just tell him, listen to me bro, just draw these like characters or animate this and give me each frame. I'll do the rest myself and you can create magic. One more thing, we will be sending links to you. We're working on a kind of a simple concept and we want to know if it's fun or not. So we'll be sending links to everyone for everyone to try and give us feedback as to how they think it is. So it also encompasses a few of the things we're learning, but it's a little bit different. But you kind of see it's still a 2D game. So we'll be reaching out to you hopefully before next week ends. And then you can share it with your friends too as well. We just want feedback. That's what we want. So yeah, we'll keep you up to date on that too as well. So thank you for this class. It was actually longer than I expected it to be. It's been 2 hours, 2 hours and 30 minutes. But yeah, I guess we've learned a lot. So,
Yes.
I'll-
Andy, thanks to you too a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, for creating time to make this happen, given that it was to have happened on Saturday. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we've also learned a lot too as well. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
And guys, also, I mean, please feel free to reach out. I mean, if you're trying to do something as it relates to the game and you're having any difficulty, the Discord group is available. So please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us.
Awesome.
No, noted.
So,
Awesome.
yeah, so the video has been recorded again for this week. We'll just edit it and remove all the extra stuff that wasn't required, and post it into the group. Post it on YouTube and put it into the group. The link to the group, so you can look through for revision purposes. Yeah. Alright. So that's it from me today. Good night, everyone. See you later.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Miss Mason.
Good night, Miss Mason.